Very much so. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session on the etiquette of meetings in Microsoft Teams. Hope you've been having a great conference and you're keeping up the learning and still feeling inspired. Just over halfway now, so getting into the final straight, and keep your focus on, keep that running going. Just overuse that marathon theme. And I love the fact that you can hold these sessions and I can still look after my kids in the evening, but I do miss the in-person events. So the ability to meet people and chat, not just text chat, but actually see face to face and say hello to people is great, and have been missing that. So make sure you sign up for the event in Vegas, the M365 conference. I'm sure you're hearing this from many of the other speakers, but do go and have a look, m365conf.com, and get registered for next March. And let's all say hello to each other properly in person then. Big thank you to all our sponsors. You know, these events really don't happen without the sponsors, so please go and check out the sponsor sessions. It's great fun building things, but go and find out what these guys can do for you already, rather than building everything from scratch every time. And really clever folk at places like AvePoint and Valo really know their stuff, and Tygraph's doing some really good things with the analytics, and all the others as well. Really good sponsors, so make sure you check them out. But for now, it's all about me. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Kevin McDonnell, based in the UK. In fact, Sevenoaks, if you happen to know the UK, just outside London to the southeast. Little story for you. In the storm in 1987, 7 of the oaks got blown down. And so there was only one oak. So for a little while we were one oak, and then they planted 7 more. So kind of should be called 8 oaks now, but what can you do? It's too late to change these things. So we've stuck with 7 oaks. I'm a solutions architect at CPS, a gold partner. Let's bring that up. Gold partner based in the UK. I look after I'm a solutions architect for the modern workplace team, so helping people across Microsoft 365 and the Power Platform as well. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called Grey Hat Beard. Bring up that there. It's a modern workplace podcast, and we talk about all things around the modern workplace, mostly focused on Microsoft 365, but we tend to natter and go off into different areas. So do check out greyhatbeard.com, give us a listen. We're on all the podcast platforms. Let us know what you think. And if you've got an idea for a show, or got an idea and want to come join us, check out the upcoming shows and you can sign up there. Enough of the self-promotion for now, so don't worry, won't keep on that for too much. I've been working with SharePoint since 2004, working in all sorts of areas, stretching, trying to break it, moving into the world of Office 365 when it came along. I've done things from being a developer, project manager. I've worked running it for a large financial services firm, and I've gone in just creating web parts and things on there, so all sorts. Could say I'm a jack of all trades, master of none, but do try and avoid that phrase too much. Quick note that all the images I've used here are actually using the Office stock images, unless I've otherwise stated. So thank you. I do quote the other people on there. Great images and worth using. Let's get into the meat of what we're talking about today, which is etiquette. Why am I talking about etiquette today? Why am I not talking about what it is that you can do in Teams? Well, the reason is there's a huge amount of things you can do with meetings, and there are many things that are blocked. There's things you can do, and there's things you can set up to make sure that people don't do things. Etiquette is about the things we could all do to help make things work better together. If people can agree how to work together, it becomes a lot easier to do the same thing again and again and again. In The Organised Mind, the book by Daniel Levitin, he notes that if you keep things in the same place, if you put your keys in the same place by the door, if you put your shoes in the same place, the brain can focus on more important things. You stop being distracted by decisions that you don't need to make, and saving that precious brain power for the important things. The same applies to meetings. All that time wasted trying to get connected, or trying to remember what the order of things you need to do, or people not being able to get their questions answered. All that is time that's lost. For meetings with a whole load of people in, that means a whole load of wasted time, and wasted time is money. So this is not about what you can do. Sorry, it's not about what you can do. It's about what you should do, how you can help be more effective in your organizations and stop those wasted hours of meetings. But in this world of COVID-19, especially, so many more of these meetings are now in Microsoft Teams. So not only do we have a set of guidelines we should follow for meetings, but a set of how to do this when everyone's sat there in their smart shirt and pajama bottoms. How do you make sure that everyone has planned ahead to connect? How do you make sure that people can get their thoughts and their views across? How do you know everyone can hear you? Let's get into that now. What I'll cover is looking at 5 areas here. We'll start with preparation and what you should do ahead of time to make sure the meeting runs well. All the things you need to prepare and set up ahead of it. Then we'll link this nicely with the tech details. So talking about different bits of hardware that you use and to consider so they work well, and also the software that makes life easier for it. And some of the things you should warn people to check as well. Then we're going to laying the foundation, how you can start off a meeting to get the best possible outcomes, how you can get things going well from the beginning, keeping everyone focused, everyone engaged straight away. And then we'll go on to how you can keep people focused, cover some ways that you can try and stop people drifting off, think about their day job, replying to emails, messages, all sorts of things, or even if they're at home, a lot easier to have things like Lemmings or Football Manager if you're a fan, playing those on the phone and getting distracted from the main meeting. So how can you keep people engaged in what you're trying to get through? And then finally, we'll look at wrapping up and sharing. How you can effectively get those things out to people, how you can close off a meeting without sounding a bit like teenage lovers trying to hang up on a phone. Think about that final endpoint to it, how you can say, yep, we're done, close off the meeting, gone. And then sharing that data out to all the other people afterwards. Let's kick off with the preparation. So when it comes to preparation, one of the key areas is the agendas. So really setting out what it is you want to achieve, sharing this within the body that you're going to be sharing, that you're going to send out to people. So the invite for the meeting, setting out those steps that you want to achieve. Make sure it's action focused. Think about what it is, telling people we need to do this, we need to do this, and trying to stick to those times. Now, one of the differences, that's something you do for every meeting and should be putting in place. You should never accept a meeting invite if there's not an agenda. Some policy that my team has, we will not accept without an agenda. But one thing to think about in this world where there are more remote meetings is those longer meetings, you need more of a breaks in between. People sat on their chairs are often not as comfy. I've had meetings with people in beds, sitting in dining room chairs that are just not the same as many of the great office chairs. So think about a little bit more time for breaks and people to stretch. It takes a bit longer to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee than it would just pressing a button on a machine in the office. So build in time for that. Next, go on to invites, and thank you to Alvaro Serrano from Unsplash for the image there. But when you think about the invites, make sure you get the right people. Don't invite the whole world to your meeting just to kind of fill out. Don't think, well, great, I've got my 9x9 box within Teams that I can see all those faces. Don't invite like all those people just for the sake of it. Get the right people you need. Because if you have more people, then you're trying to find out who's available, and you suddenly are juggling all sorts of people's busy calendars. I don't know about you, but my calendar certainly hasn't got any quieter in this remote time that we're living in. In fact, it's even busier. So trying to find slots that are available is hard. The more people you have, the harder that's going to be. And perhaps if you do need to invite a lot of people, make sure you put lots of those as optional. Don't invite them and feel you have to have them all there. Think about using the optional parameters. And then when you are scheduling time, think about using things like Outlook and the scheduling built into that. Use Find Time and even Cortana. And I'll do a demo of Cortana and how that can be used to help you schedule and take some of your time back as well. Finally, think about those pre-reads and requirements. So if you're sending out, depending on the type of meeting, maybe it's to gather some requirements or to sign off requirements, then send out and tell people that you need them to read those requirements up front. In fact, even better, because your meeting's in Teams, put it in the tab related to that meeting. We'll demo that in a sec to show how that can work. But putting everything in one place within Teams and referring people to that means when they forget where it is, it's very easy to get back to. It's very easy to look within those tabs, within those things that need signing off. The other one is think about what you're asking people to do beforehand. If they're using Teams, and especially if it's an external meeting, maybe the people they're talking with doesn't use Teams as much. So think about whether you can ask them to check ahead of time, make sure they've got all the software installed and everything's ready for that. And also think about, are you going to get people to have video? Do you want to see them? Do you want to see them face to face, even if they are drifting off, chatting to the kids? Set aside that and do that ahead of time. Because otherwise, going to get to the meeting, no makeup, hair all over the place, with a male or female on there. They're going to be not looking ready for a video. And when that happens, if you tell them to turn their video on, they're far less likely, and they're going to feel more antagonistic to you if you are forcing them. If you've asked them ahead of time, it gives them that time to prepare and be ready for it. So think about doing that as well. Let's get into the tech details. So when you're thinking about the tech details, think about kind of two different views from it. One is to think about the host, what you would need as hosting a meeting, what are you going to get prepared there? And then think about the attendees. What are you asking them to have? Whoops, sorry, jumping too far ahead there. So for the host, think about having two screens. I've got two screens here. I've got one that I'm showing here, that the presentation that you can all see, and I can show different bits up and base there. Then I have my notes and other items and the messages coming through on the other screen. And I can flick very easily between those, and I can kind of nicely bring up on this side, check to see if there's any questions while you're talking and having a look at those, and not being impacted too much the main screen. Fortunately, the Alt tab does do that slightly, but generally you can use those two different ones and you can flick between the two and make use of that. So it's very useful to have those two screens. Now, you may not be lucky enough to be where you are. You may just have your laptop. You kind of ran away from the office when the offices were shut down, and you may not have those two screens. You could hook up a television. Sometimes that works, but that might not exist in the office. But you could also use things like iPads in this world where you've got so many of these connected devices with Microsoft 365. You could have on your phone there, have the same presentation that you're putting up there and put your notes on the phone and have that next to your screen on there. So you don't necessarily need to have two different monitors to get the benefits of those two screens. So think about ways that you could use that as the host. Make sure you've tested the mic, look for feedback and things like that. I've got an external mic here plugged in with USB. I also have my backup headphones here, so I know that if things go wrong, I can resort to that. If the sound isn't coming across nicely, I've always got those two different ones. Think about if there's a lot of noise outside. I'm looking outside at the moment. My teenage son is out there trying to fix his skateboard as we speak. I've asked him to be quiet. He's been pretty good so far. But if you're going to get a lot of background noise, then think about maybe using your headset where it filters that noise towards your mouthpiece a little bit better on there. And hopefully soon with Teams, I know that Jeff Teeper yesterday talked about the Teams background noise in the keynote. If you haven't listened, go back and give that a check on YouTube. It will be able to filter those. And great example, you can sit there with a bag of popcorn or a bag of crisps without noise. And that sounds great for working at home, exactly the kind of thing we need. Other things to think about, I actually have two keyboards down here, one that I use for presentations like this. It's a little bit smaller and I find it a bit fiddly for general work, especially for development where I'm kind of hacking away and whacking the keys quite hard. But for when I'm presenting, I want something a bit quieter. It's got a lot quieter keys than my mechanical keyboard that I use usually. And I can tap on the mouse click a lot quieter than the others. So think about those different noises. Apologies if you are hearing some squeak in the background. Just realised I haven't turned off the autofocus. In fact, I might do that very quickly now and hope I'm staying in focus on there. But think about some of those background noises and as I say, use a headset if possible. What's great about those bits is most of those apply to attendees as well. Slightly less important if they're mostly listening versus if you're talking a lot more. So you may not need so much there. If you're an attendee, you're probably more likely taking notes, which may be handwritten notes using Post-its, you may be using a notebook or using your Surface with your Surface pen. So think about making sure you have all those available. And if you need those two devices, you can even take notes on your phone. Again, that connected Microsoft 365 gives you that way to be able to have that single place to put things across multiple devices. Finally, onto webcam positioning. Now I've got my webcam up nice and high because of this lockdown. I have far too many chins at the moment. By putting the webcam up high, you get a nice angle from there. Unfortunately, you've got the reverse for blokes like myself who've got the slightly receding hairline and disappearing hair on top. A higher webcam can also shine on that a little bit. So think about what angle you want and test it out. It can sound like a vain thing, but do think about what you want and how you want to appear on the webcam. Not just having it built into the laptop. Think about what you can get. You can go out there and get different devices, swap round, work out what works for you, use different desk orientations, even just pile books up to get a higher bit for your laptop where you need to. Think about that positioning there. And also think about lighting. I've actually got a desk lamp here. I'm using a Philips Hue bulb, and there I can adjust the brightness and set to different levels. And also think about the window positioning. So you want the light from outside coming in front of you, so it's lighting up your face. If you have it from behind, you can have a bright light behind you, but in front of you, you're going to appear very, very dark and very hard to see. So when you want to get those expressions to people, it's not going to be coming through the same way. So think about that positioning of lights, and again, try it out beforehand. Let's go on to some of the software now and some of the things that you can use. I mentioned Cortana and FindTime. That's very useful for getting together and organising your meetings. Also recommend using Whiteboard, where you can get a shared whiteboard effectively, where you may have had meetings and everyone scribbles. I've got a physical whiteboard on the wall here, but if you want to share things that people can go into, then use Whiteboard, and I'll demo a bit of that later. One thing to note on that, it doesn't work for external, so that will only be within your organization itself. So think about that and plan ahead. If you do have external users, then possibly try and use OneNote, where you can share that externally and give that out to other people. And on that note, I'm going to try this now. I have a horrible feeling that these settings may not come through, but let's give a couple. No, it's not going to allow me to share it today. What I was going to do was share out a link to the OneNote to say to you, everyone can go in there and put some messages and maybe give some of your feedback on useful tips that you've got. Perhaps I could ask you to put it in the questions. So in either side to the screen here, let's think, I think it's probably that side. If you could put some comments and tips that you had in there, and I can pick a couple of those and share those. What tips would you have for running meetings in Teams that maybe I haven't mentioned? But certainly using OneNote is a great one, and it's a good way to keep people engaged that we'll cover a bit later. Planner's another great bit of software, again, very integrated with Teams. You can have that as your tab that appears along the top there, and you can therefore go into that and have your actions all in one place. The great thing about being in Teams for meetings is you have all in one place for stuff. One of the ones that you may not have considered, though, is the Postit app. And I'm just going to flip across and do a quick demo. Actually, I'll come back to the demo of that a little bit later. But the Postit app allows you to work with your physical Post-its. I still love Post-its. I like making a quick squiggle, making sure they're appropriate to each meeting, sticking them on the wall. And certainly if you're having meetings there and you're capturing requirements or capturing comments and issues, scribble them down on a Post-it. With the Postit app, which is available for iOS and Android, you can then take a photo of that and store it. And I'll come into a little demo of that in a minute. But for now, let's go into some other demos and start showing how Teams can in fact be used for this. Now, which window am I looking at? Good old Megan Bowen up. So for those who haven't seen this, Megan Bowen is part of a sample set of data, and so I'm logged in as Megan in a demo tenant, and I'm going to go into Teams. Now Megan's part of the marketing team for the rollout of the Mark 8, which many of you may have seen in various demonstrations and other things today. Another top tip, you can use Teams on the desktop and then have different instances and Teams in the browser. So if you're working across two different tenants, great way to get access to those tenants easily. So Megan's part of the Mark 8 project team, and as part of that, she's in marketing, and they're working through the go-to-market plan. So the Mark 8 is a new drone that Contoso organisation's going to be rolling out, and they're starting to plan how they can get the marketing out there, their presentations. You can see there's some tasks. We're using Planner within this to look at the main deck and create 3D samples for the stage. So they're starting to plan some of those items ahead. And within Teams, we've got all our files in one place. We've got all the things like the product roadmap that you can have as tabs along the top of that screen, so you can keep an eye on your budget as you're going through and what's needed and the total cost trends that's going through from creating the item. You can look at your plan for going to market, that presentation we're talking about there. Only a few slides in there, so maybe not quite enough for a full meeting. You've got your full project plan in there, but it's the event plan that we're interested in at the moment. For marketing, we're organising a big razzmatazz biz presentation. Let's imagine this is back in the world where we can all sit together in a big conference hall and view a big presentation, Apple style, or at least trying to be as good as some of theirs. Nowhere near as good as Microsoft. No one can get that far, obviously. But putting together your different items. So there's a few to-dos here, making sure you've got your expenses going on there. And one of them is the main deck review. So checking to make sure that presentation is enough. And as you just saw, there's only 3 slides in there, so there's probably more we need to do. So what Megan's going to do is organise a meeting with Grady Archie and Lydia Holloway. And so Megan will go into the calendar and set up a new meeting. So I'm going to make sure we schedule that. Let's call it finalize main deck. We've got the event coming up pretty soon on there. I'm going to add some attendees. So I think we said Grady needs to be in there, and let's add Lydia. Let's mention there may be some others that it could be helpful, but I don't want to fill out too much. So let's get some optional people in there. Let's try and think. Well, the MOD administrator is a name that comes to mind, but make sure you think about those optional ones on there that you may want to add. Let them know the meeting's happening, but maybe they don't need to attend. You can see straight away by adding those people on there that I've got some suggested times for the meeting. It's by default set as half an hour. I tend to like for my meetings personally to set them for 45 minutes. Rather than setting for an hour and then the next person sets them for an hour, you've got no time in between. If things overrun, you're already late for the next meeting. Great thing about being online for many of these meetings is at least you just hang up and join the other meeting on there, waiting a few seconds while you choose which background picture you want to use today, but generally can go quite quickly. But you want a little bit of time in between to prepare for the next one, and certainly when you're not face to face, putting in a bit of time between that gives you the capability to go on to the next one is useful. And again, it's suggested with those times that I could pick on there, set to my colleagues in the US, so it's recommending times that I tend to work on there for that one. And if I then go through, one of the big things is I want to make sure that it gets added to the channel. So I'm going to put it in the go-to market plan, and that means that the meeting will take place in the channel. All those tabs are available, linked to it. Use that within there. So by organising the meeting within Teams rather than Outlook, as many people would in the past, you've got that direct link into those different tabs that you can make use of. So do pick that up. As I said, great thing, you can add a location, and if you were in the places, you can pick a building. As you can see, they're all free at the moment because no one's in the office. But being in Teams, we can just leave that location out of there, and we'll just put some agenda in here. So I'm just going to bring up my notes with that agenda in. And pick that up. So when you think about the agenda, think about the things I talked about there. What are the action points that you need to get together? What are the outcomes that you want to get from it? What are you going to cover? What order are you going to cover in it? If it's a short meeting, such as this minutes, then you probably don't need to worry too much about the timelines. You know, spending 3.33 minutes on update on tasks. Spending 3.74 minutes on the other items isn't going to be as helpful. You don't need to worry too much about that, but put it in the order, say the order that you're going to be working things on, and make it clear that it is an agenda that you're going to be using from there. So add that agenda on there. Oops, sorry. And then you can send it out to people. Of course, if you want to make sure just on the scheduling, you can use those suggested times. You can go to the scheduling assistant and you can look for the different slots. So actually, I'm going to go for that one because it'll sit nicely, give me a bit of time ready for my next Project Tailspin meeting there. And I can send that through. That's looking all good. I will send off my meeting nicely. Now, one of the other things that's useful is to be able to schedule those things automatically. There, obviously, the calendar wasn't too busy. I could see free time. And in fact, the time I picked showed up quite nicely. And there were a few other options where everyone was available. It's not always the case. And it can sometimes take quite a bit of time. And even if you want to go and speak to someone, say, are you actually available here? Can you be available at this point? Why not let something else do that for you? Why not let artificial intelligence do that back and forth for you? And there's something from Cortana that gives exactly that. If you go to calendar.help and log in with your Microsoft account, you'll get some details here, and I can go and see my meetings. It gives me a little bit of a dashboard. Can be a little slow to load the first time, gives me a chance for a sip of water. So you can see some of the different meetings that it's working on, and it can help you here schedule focus time. So if you want to block out time to make sure people aren't filling up your calendar, you can actually get some work done. You can fill out weekly one-to-ones. So with your team, set that up as a one-to-one in there, and it will find an appropriate time. When that meeting's finished, if you say you want it every week or every 2 weeks, it will set up in a week or 2 weeks time, depending on what you've said, the next meeting after each one. And it means you're not necessarily blocking out that slot that you find a kind of whole day meeting suddenly takes away your time from it. Instead, you can let Cortana wiggle things around to fit around where your availability is. So absolutely fine if you want to keep with your regular slot with people, do that. If you're finding perhaps your manager is not getting the time with you to go in those regular slot, great, use Cortana, and then it will find time in both of your calendars automatically. So you can do it through here, or you can actually do it directly from your Outlook, from your email. So I'm going to email Lydia, and all you need to do is also copy in Cortana. And you'll see there's Cortana at calendar.help with your email, meeting on deck updates. And I'm going to use the at mentioning, because it's always good to draw a bit more attention. Can we get a meeting in to finalise more of the details with just us? And then just saying there, Cortana, can you find time tomorrow for us to meet? To do. And if we send that off, because Cortana's been CC'd in there, it will come back to you. Now it takes a couple of minutes. Now I could waffle on for you for a little bit, but I'm just going to pick up what's happened here. So you can see, oh, that was the original setup. Let's take the first email that I got back from Cortana that said, hopefully you can read that okay. Let me just try and zoom in a little bit to make that a bit bigger. It said, I've received your message. I'll try and find a time that works for Lydia and get the meeting scheduled. If necessary, I'll reach out to Lydia with some options. Now that is a really important point, that, because it will actually work. In fact, there we go. Fantastic. New one's come in. It will actually work with external people. So it doesn't have to have access to the calendar. Great if it has, and if they've enabled it, it will use calendars where it's got access, even if they're using outlook.com and apparently even gmail.com. I will be honest, I haven't tried that, but it quotes that it can use Gmail as well. So it will first say, great, I'm going to try and find some time, and there we go. It's returned nicely and beeped loudly to let me know it's set aside 30 minutes in your calendar, Friday at 10 AM with Lydia. And it's also suggested some other time. So if you can look at that time and go, yeah, that's great, but I kind of have another meeting on there, then you can actually just pick up one of the other times, shift that meeting to the other one, and it'd be great. And as I say, if that person isn't on a way where they can access their calendar, it will just drop an email saying these times are available. So instead of saying that one, it will say, are any of these good? The person will reply just in natural text, yes, that is a good meeting, and it will come back and schedule it in for you. So it's a great example of how Microsoft's using AI, everyday AI, easy to say than that, everyday AI built into the system that you can make use of. So well worth taking a look at on there. Let's go back to demo. I'm just going to double check and make sure there's no questions. Let's have a quick look. Someone said also you can sedate younger children animals. That is a lovely idea. It's a little bit frowned on in the UK. It is tempting. I have tried tiring out my kids. I've got 3 boys and at times have been working at the same time. My wife works as a pharmacist, so is away. I find that YouTube and Sky and Netflix tends to sedate them nicely for a little bit of time, but not too long. So juggling those has been a lot of entertaining fun. So lovely kids occasionally. Right, let's move on. Yeah, I mentioned I was going to demo the Postit app. So here's an example, 3 Post-its, not real ones on there. Sorry, I keep coming to Grey Hat Beard. You'll find a lot of very sneaky ones where I subtly drop those into there as well. But I've got these Post-its up on my wall, and yesterday I took a photo of those, and you'll then use the Post-it app on the phone to take that photo, and then you can process it. If you've used Office Lens, it's pretty similar to that in that you get it processed. It will change the contrast to make it very clear, so it'll kind of take off some of the dirt, try and get the text as easy to read as possible, as you can sort of see from there, from my slightly sludgy handwriting from it. And then you can save that, and actually in the app you can move those around like Post-its, so it's great on there. As you can with Post-its, you can lift them and move them around your wall as you kind of reschedule things. The same with these in the app, you can drag them to different places. Probably works a little better on an iPad if you've got a lot of Post-its, but within that small app it's good as well. So make use of that. But the best thing about it is, and what I hate is, often you take photos of those physical ones and then you go back home and you write up everything afterwards, and you're having to go through and try and read what everyone's handwriting is bit by bit, and it's just dull. Let the Post-it app do that for you. So you can actually take that picture and put it into Excel. You can see that I've exported those. It's given me a picture of what the ones are, and then it has converted that text into real text as well. It's not perfect, you know, I'm not trying to solve the work-oof balance, if you can see there, just in case it's a little bit small. Here's a couple of larger versions of that. So you can see solving the work-oof balance, but you can very quickly just go and change it within the Excel. You can see published latest Grey Hat Beard. It's picked up perfectly. Obviously a big fan of Grey Hat Beard as well. So it's pretty good. I find it's about 70 or 80% correct in there, depending on different types of handwriting. It can be the scribbled handwriting on there. Even just having it all put the number of different Post-its in one Excel makes it easy to put in there, and then you can paste it into Word, paste it into PowerPoint as you want and need it. Great way of working with that. Another useful tool I'd recommend that sits alongside nicely with Teams is the Graph meeting capture sample. So this is something that the Graph team have put together. You can see on there they've announced it. I think it was back around Ignite time last year. And what you get within that is an app that sits as a tab within there. So you can go and create new meetings, similar to what I was doing in Teams a few minutes ago. But within this, you create the app, you can add your attendees very easily within one single page. You can put your agenda again on that single page. So you've got that single page view of what you want. You can also put your attachments, where it talks about getting those pre-reads out to people. Those attachments which sit in Teams can sit very nicely on that one page, so you're not even having to go to the different tabs. As you're running the meeting itself, you can type your notes for there. I would say this is one bit I probably grumble about, in that it would be nice if this was OneNote and they could surface OneNote through there somehow, or have it sync back to OneNote, because it's nice to have your meeting minutes for multiple meetings all coming across in one place, but nice to see it on the screen there. And then finally, your planner tasks. So you can hook it up with a planner list, get your actions from the meeting, hit that big plus button as you're going through the meeting. Instead of kind of scribbling a note saying it's an action, get it down into planner as quickly as possible. And then it's far more likely to be tracked and far more likely to be updated than it is in someone's notebook written one way, someone's notebook written another way, and you get 2 different versions. Get it in planner as early as possible. So really useful way of picking up and going from that. The other one that's good with this, it's built in some of the integrations where it will send an email if there are pre-reads to remind people a little while ahead of the meeting to get there, to have read those documents. And it uses the power of the graph. So if you are a developer and interested in the graph, it's a good sample on that to go and see how it hooks into the different things like planner and the notes and where it saves those. So at very least worthwhile looking at that. I would put one big caveat around it. It is very much an open source project. It is not the easiest thing to install. There are a lot of steps, still quite a few manual steps involved with it. You have to put in place a DNS entry, so you'll need to be able to get either a free DNS or have access to your own one on there. There's quite a few complex steps in there. I'd love to see that tidied up and made a little bit simpler, and possibly it uses things like SQL. It'd be good to get a smaller version of it that doesn't use something which is relatively expensive, even SQL as a service on there in Azure. So definitely using a lot of Azure things in there. I wouldn't say if you're expecting just a click install, this is not that. But yeah, do reach out to me if you've got any questions on that. Would love to try and help you with that. As I say, if you just Google or Bing graph meeting capture sample, you can find details. It's all up there on GitHub, so do give that a look. If nothing else, the ideas from it are absolutely brilliant. So you can even create a similar thing yourself, perhaps using Power Apps and others. Would be well worth looking out for that. So let's get into the actual meeting itself. Let's talk about laying the foundation. And when it comes to the foundations, there are 4 key areas to think about. The start of the meeting sets a tone, and it's a good chance to lay out the rules to all the attendees, then go into covering the agenda and making sure people know what's coming up, think ahead to what's needed so they can plan their time and know maybe when they need to be more awake than others on there. Maybe if they are doing some work on the side, people do that even more with multiple screens. They know that roughly what time will be coming to. And also if there's things they need to prepare, which they may do during the meeting because they haven't done, they've got a little bit more time to work on that. Finally, think about introductions. Might be that people know each other, but if they don't, make sure you've set aside time for that. Let's go a little bit further into those. So at the start, and I think this is so important now at the moment, it's always good at the beginning of a meeting to leave a bit of time because people turn up late and things like that. But with Teams and Teams itself, some people may have technical issues, not know what they're doing with it, especially if they're not using Teams regularly. Leave a bit of time at the beginning for people to have a chat. And then if there's any technical issues, you can deal with that. And this time of COVID-19, where lots of people are stuck at home, I think mental health is such a struggle for many people at the moment. It gives that time for people to have a chat. I've been working with someone who's basically living on their own, and those chats at the beginning of the meeting are often the biggest chat she has all day. So it's a really good time for her to kind of vent, let other people know how she's feeling and just relax a little bit. So build in a little bit of time at the start to have those conversations, let everyone mentally prepare, deal with those tech issues and get things started on the right foot. And before you get things started, also need to think about the rules. Think about interruptions. What do I mean by that? What I mean is if you've got a question. So if someone wants to ask a question, let's flip over to Teams again. Let's bring the wrong one up there. If we just set up a new meeting now, you'll hopefully have seen, we're going to continue with that audio video, let's join that meeting. You'll hopefully have seen now there is the option to raise your hand. So if someone wants to interrupt and ask a question, do they do it by shouting out, using the microphone and talking to people? Do they do it by physically having the video and putting their hand up and kind of waving? Or they could make use of that raise your hand functionality. But it is also important to note what that is, because when that is relatively new to people. And there was someone I was speaking to recently, and they were in a meeting and someone kept raising and lowering their hand and raising and lowering their hand every few minutes, and it was driving them a little crazy. So what actually happened, what actually turned out, because when they eventually asked, is they thought that was a high five. They thought it was like a like within Facebook. So you got the Facebook Live videos, you like those. They thought they were just liking what people were saying. So while it may seem obvious to you, make sure it's obvious to other people as well. Feeling my camera's just frozen. Let me just get that back to life. No, it has died off. I'm just going to flip. Now, one thing to make sure is you do have your backups and things on there. I've been using a Canon camera primarily at the moment, but I'll flip it back over instead to use the Canon on the Surface instead. So slightly different angle, not quite as flattering because it's a bit closer and showing far more chins, but we can crack on from there. So yeah, think about those interruptions. Maybe, it's a great example there. If something goes wrong, how are you going to handle that? What are you going to do with it? Maybe, again, we talked about kids and pets and things like that. How are you going to deal with those that you're going to take place? What is your rules of that? If someone needs a toilet, do they put their hand up or do they just sneak off? Lay out those ground rules at the beginning, and you're going to have a much better way of the meeting running on there. Another one that I talked about videos there, whether you want videos to be on. Encourage people to have their videos on. You can see that reaction, see how they're going on. Are they listening? Are they drifting off to other things? You can get that focus on what's going on. And it also means if there are kids interrupting, and you won't get cross with them, you can understand why things are happening there. So tell people if you want people to have videos on, warn them ahead of time, but also lay it out at the beginning of the meeting. Think about time for breaks. So what are the rules? Are you going to have a break in the meeting for 45 minutes? Do you need it? Do you need more time at the end, etc.? Think about one person at a time speaking. When you're looking with microphones and using Teams like this, it's bad in real face-to-face meetings when you have lots of people speaking at the same time, but it's even harder to hear when you're going through. So reiterate that you want one person speaking at a time. If you want a way of doing that, again, the raise the hands is a great way of doing that. That means I want to speak, and ask everyone else to mute when they're not speaking. So get them muting on this. You're reducing that background noise as well that comes through. Lay out those rules to people and just let people know right at the beginning what they are and what you expect from them. If we go on to the agenda, again, not too much different. I've talked a lot about this. Make sure you've got those clear timings, clear outcomes, time for breaks, etc. That will be in there. And lay those out to people once again at the beginning, just to remind people. Hopefully they've read it in the meeting invite and however else you've sent it, but just remind and do a quick run through of that. Don't spend hours and hours on it, but just remind people on what's in there. Finally, introductions. Again, as I mentioned earlier, may not be a need for this. It may be a regular meeting you're having every week, you know each other. But if it's a new project, could be with external people, could even be with internal people in large organisations where you don't know them, lay it out and ask everyone one by one, give their name, what their role is, either within the project or within the organisation itself, and then their aim for the meeting. And that's a great way to kind of make sure that everyone's understanding whether they've read the agenda and also whether they're understanding what they're trying to get from the meetings. And there may be things that you hadn't considered. So it's always useful one just to scribble and understand what people want from it. Important one, I've hit this a few times, is when you're in a physical meeting, when you do those introductions, you generally go around the table one by one. You possibly nominate someone, or you go first and then go through the one by one. When you're on a Teams meeting, the orders may be different for different people. And if you just allow people bit by bit, sometimes they go in a kind of obvious order, but often just lots of pausing, lots of waiting. So nominate people. Maybe you've got your participant list, just go through in the order they appear there, or maybe an order you think sensible, but be prepared to say, and you next. Give them the opportunity to say their roles. Don't say what they are. Give them that chance to put across things there, but nominate their names, and then you get a good idea on of making sure you're not wasting time. You could, if it's a longer meeting, consider a game. And this is a way really to ease the tension. We talked about kind of getting people focused. A game draws everyone to that meeting, gets everyone thinking about that. Often at the start of the meeting, you're thinking about the previous meeting. You're thinking about all the other things you have to do or getting nervous about this one. A game is just a way to get people focused. Now, I'm not thinking that you play, what's called dodgeball or something like that across the table, or some kind of virtual northeast southwest, as I do. I run a cub pack, and we've tried that there. But a great one is 2 truths and a lie. So each person one by one has to say 3 things, 2 of them are true and 1's a lie, and everyone has to guess what they are. Great introduction. We had a 3-day workshop of a new intranet project, and when we kicked off, we found out that one of the guys was from Sweden and actually was in a covers band that covered Toto and Europe covers solely, but were actually quite famous across the north of Sweden. And I don't think anyone guessed that was true. Everyone assumed that was a lie and was the true one. So it's a great icebreaker and gets everyone laughing a little bit, calms everyone down. Won't work always. If you want a serious meeting, may not fit in there, but think about ways you can get people focused, get in on this meeting, get them involved. If you just keep talking, much as I'm doing now, they're going to drift off. So think about ways that you can get them involved and focused. And once you've got them focused, you've got to think about ways to keep them focused. So getting people to contribute. getting people to chat, which reminds me again, let's just have a quick look and see if there's any questions. Flicking up on that. So think about the chat on there. You could ask people to put any comments within there, any things that as you're going through it all. Hopefully, Walter, I'm now showing my camera and that's coming up now. But think about how you're getting those things across. The other one I talked about, whiteboard. Let's bring that up, and that was one I forgot to open, so let's just open that up now. With whiteboard, it is exactly like a whiteboard, and especially if people have a surface and have the pen, it's a great way to draw on that. You can still draw with the mouse and draw shapes and different bits on there, but it's really, really close to real time. So you can, where you've got those moments where two of you have got a pen on a board and you're kind of sketching out ideas and maybe building up how things connect to each other. If you've done a data integration project, there's often, you're drawing diagrams of where's going to where, or even screens. If you're developing an intranet project, you've got this screen needs to go to this screen, you want this line, and then someone scrubs it out. You can do all that in a virtual way with Microsoft Whiteboard. As a dimension, it only works with the it does only work when you're internal. Let me drag this across and show an example, but it's a great way of doing this. And you can also within this do things like put Post-it notes. So this whiteboard is actually from a hackathon we did a few weeks ago, just before the Microsoft Business Applications Summit. Myself and a few colleagues joined together, and it was the MBAS Hack for Good. So we had to come up with some ideas on there. So we started scribbling down some of the themes in yellow there that we thought of and put cards, and everyone was creating these all at the same time. So we can directly put these in at the same bit, and then we got onto, right, we want to do the managing back to work, a key thing that we were looking at. We decided a canteen management app would work well there. So we then created another one of these templates about brainstorming and added some of the ideas to there. And then we went a bit further into designing it, and you can see here we started to do the drawing. I started to put down the different personas. Apologies for my handwriting, it is absolutely abysmal. But you can see others started joining as well. So when you draw the lines, it can turn those into proper lines for you, and you can start to get other people drawing at the same time. You can see we were drawing up the screens there and over this side. In fact, other people were looking at different areas of the same whiteboard at the same time. So we're having different conversations all in one place. And it gives you that whiteboard experience exactly as you would have in a real whiteboard, but there virtually that you can all work on at the same time, and it keeps people engaged. Same can happen in OneNote. So where in real meetings, sometimes I give Post-its out, and if we're talking about requirements, I ask people to write down some of their ideas, because it gives a voice to the quieter people. I've run retrospectives as well with teams, and especially some developers are not particularly known for speaking out, but giving them the opportunity to go and either fill in a OneNote and putting their comments in there, or even you can use Microsoft Forms and have them submit ideas there live during the meeting, collate those up, use Flow to put them on a list, maybe write them to SharePoint, and then you can drag and drop and move those over the place live during the meeting. So think about different tools and bits of technology that you can use for there. Also change the focus. You see me during this meeting that I've kind of in different ways, showing the different bits that go on. Another example that I would try and use within Grey Hat Beard, for some reason there's something at the top of the screen there. Just going to play this briefly. When we're playing, we flip the faces. So we try and show some of the screens, what we're talking about. For example, there we were talking about the new Microsoft Graph to Do API, and then we flipped over to having our faces. So change that perspective, put the faces up. And I've again remembered, I forgot this during the rehearsal as well. I was going to flip and try and show my face a little bit more on the main camera. Think about doing that, sharing your screen, not sharing your screen, just changing that focus gives people a new view, a new way on there. And also think about think about different people speaking, giving people the opportunity. In a session like this, I'd love to give you a chance to hear from you as well. Not quite so easy, unfortunately, but think about that within meetings, within your team's meeting, and how that can be done. It's also worth thinking about the right way to speak. You've probably heard podcasters and YouTubers, and either you think it's great or you think it's really annoying, but the way and the tone that they get things across really helps to keep things going. But also the right person. I'm going to go into a little story. It's from the book Messengers, which I've suddenly gone blank in remembering the the name of the author, but it's a really good book on there. It's called Messengers, if you look it up from there, and it talks about getting your message across. And a great example, there were 2 tweets after the Charlottesville riots back in August 2017. And one tweet caught much of the sentiment afterwards and really wrapped up what people are feeling. It said, "The people of the US should come to terms, unify and work together regardless of race to make the country great. Hashtag Charlottesville." Really wrapped up what many people at the time were feeling. Another tweet, there was actually a quote from Nelson Mandela, so kind of effectively copied and pasted, said, "No one is born hating another person because of the colour of his skin or background or his religion." Didn't really give much context on there. But yeah, very, very good sentiments on there. Absolutely agree with them, but didn't really wrap up the Charlottesville on there. What was interesting is the first one had 0 retweets, 0 likes, and just the 1 comment. And if I look at that tweet, it's a nice one. I certainly, if I'd seen it, would have liked it. The second one had 1.6 million retweets, 4.4 million likes, and loads of comments. And you may wonder why, and you may have guessed, you may even recognise the tweets that the first, probably didn't recognise that one, was from Robbie McHale, an unknown Twitter user. The second was from Barack Obama, the former US president. Now, obviously, he has a lot more followers, a lot more gravitas. It doesn't matter what he says. People will like and retweet and engage with what he's saying on there. And it's a thing to think about in your meetings, that it's not necessarily the content you're putting across. Sadly, it can be about who you are. Now, use that to your advantage. Bring in managers, bring in maybe the tech people to talk about the tech stuff, because they may get listened to more because people will believe them. Think about bringing your managers to get more weight behind what you're saying. Yes, hopefully they'll acknowledge you and give you the respect there, but you will use the right people at the right time to help get that message across. Do I think that's the right thing? No, I wish that the message itself was powerful enough and people lifting that, but the reality is different, and make sure you're prepared for that and use it as well. Finally, we're going to go into wrapping up and sharing. I'm going to try and finish quickly for a few questions. So think about the key points, give people that as a takeaway, actions and things for the next meeting, get those into Planner, get them ticked off and ready for the next meeting. Set a time, perhaps, if you've got a follow-up meeting within that, schedule it there and then, and share the minutes and docs in Teams. So again, use Teams as that central hub for everything. Make use of that, and then you can really get the right things going. People know where to go back to, and it gives you that place. Put all the minutes in Teams and put it all in OneNote and as a tab in Teams, then it's there and ready. And you've got the details you need to go ahead. So talking of wrapping up and sharing, I will go on to my final slide. If I was going to give you some top tips to take away, use the tech appropriately. Use that tech to be available. Oops, sorry, just bring that up. Make sure it's available there. And use it as much as possible, but also think about others, how others cope. Do they know about the tech? Can they use it effectively? Make sure you've given us enough time. Make sure you've thought about how they're feeling, especially during this COVID-19. They may have kids around, they have all sorts of things going on. So make sure you plan ahead. Think about how they're feeling, plan ahead to the way they will be. And be clear, get your message across, get your point in there, and use those messengers, as I mentioned slightly before. Get them available and get the key parts there. Thank you very much for listening. I will go back and answer the questions that are in there shortly. I'm just trying to see, I can see some people saying, as you like OneNote, you consider taking a picture of a document and it'll also crop and pass text. That's a great example of using OneNote, definitely on there. How do you get the meeting capture? The meeting capture sample, if you Google or Bing graph meeting capture sample, or just ping me at Kev McDonk on there. I'm happy to pass on the details there. Now, make sure, I'm sure you've heard many of this. I hope you've stuck around to the end of these sessions and you've signed up for the raffle. So visit the vendor booth sessions and watch the videos, submit your answers to enter the raffle, and you can get the Oculus, I always get this the wrong way, it's not the Rift, the Oculus Quest. So great little products. Make sure you sign up for that. Also think about donating to charity. I've mentioned COVID a few times. It's affecting so many of us. My wife's an NHS pharmacist, so working with people affected by this, and it's horrific. So please think about donating some people there. I've been Kevin McDonnell, say at Kev McDonk on Twitter, Kev McDonnell on LinkedIn. I'm on GitHub, and do listen out for the Grey Hat Beard podcast. We're on Twitter at Grey Hat Beard or www.greyhatbeard.com. Thank you very much. I've just seen one other question. Someone said, back to Cortana, schedule a topic. If our company's still in islands mode, is there a way to force it to book a Teams meeting instead of Skype? That's a very good question. I will try and find out for you, Wayne, quickly now, and reply to that one in the chat, which should get back to you at some point. But otherwise, thank you very much. And thank you, Kelly. I'm looking out, and yes, my son has fixed his skateboard and appears to now be trying to go down to the slide in it, which is not ideal. So it's probably a great time for me to wrap up and go and chase and find out what's happening. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a great time. Oh, please do the speaker feedback. Would love to know what you think. Would love to know if you'd hear more. Thank you very much otherwise.